Here. Greetings all. Welcome to our May meeting of the Lacey Equity Commission. I call the meeting to order. And our first order of business is approval of the agenda, previous minutes and consent items.
I move that we approve the agenda previous minutes. Consent items.
Thank you.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda, previous meeting minutes and consent items be approved. Yes.
Chair Jackson, I would just make a request to approve the agenda with the edits that the inspirational item is Commissioner Stolberg instead of Commissioner Sauer as indicated on the agenda.
Thank you. I had made my corrections, so when we got there, I was going to make that change. Thank you. So let the record so show. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Do we have anyone joining us online or on the phone today?
Chair Jackson, there are no attendees online or on the phone.
Okay, very good. Makes management a lot easier. Yes, yes. And none on the phone or online, but there are 5 of us present, so we have a quorum and can execute business. Great, great. Seeing none on the Zoom or on the phone, we will go to our inspirational item, and that's Commissioner Stolberg. Thank you for volunteering to do that this week.
Yeah, of course. So I am going to read a part of a poem. It's called Mental Health is a Tricky One by Geraldine Carlton, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, in case anyone didn't know. I was going to bring, I think I talked about this before when we were talking about our community organizations, when we were coming up with a list of them. I think Thurston County has a chapter for NAMI. It's the National, oh my gosh, Alliance of Mental, I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
yeah. And they have a lot of really good resources on there, especially up right now for Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'll just go ahead and read this. Again, it's called Mental Health is a Tricky One. You can't tell from far away how well someone is doing or how hard they're finding each day. Sometimes the downs seem never ending and the ups feel few and far between. And the happy front you show the world is not necessarily what it seems. The reality is that no one is normal and perfect. We all have things to face each day. It's just that people don't open up because the mental health topic is too risque. Mental health comes in many guises, but the reality can be cruel and bleak. Not being able to leave your home for days, feeling too vulnerable, too scared, too weak. And yet you wouldn't expect anyone to run fast with an ankle that's battered and bruised. So why expect someone to think straight, smile wide with the brain that's hurting or confused? X-rays can't check mental health. You won't hear its beat on a stethoscope. That's often why problems go left unchecked, why vulnerable people are left alone to cope. Be positive, they say, look on the bright side, they suggest. This isn't always easy to do, however, when you're anxious and stressed. So how can you help someone whose mental health you're worried about? Start by showing them they're not alone. Offer your hand, your time, and reach out.
Very good. Thank you. That moves us to our business items then.
Yeah, and good evening, commissioners. It's good to be here. We have not a guest. We have Grant Beck, our Planning and Development Services Manager, joining us today for the first business item. And I just wanted to introduce Grant really quickly to the commission, and maybe just a real quick round of introductions for Grant to introduce everybody to the commissioners.
Well, I'm Cliff Brown. I'm the deputy chair, or the vice chair of the commission.
Annie Clay.
Nice to meet you.
Thelma Jackson, chair of the commission. Thank you for being here.
I'm Alanis Blackburn. I'm our youth representative. Christine Stolberg.
Nice to meet you all. And I've been with Lacey for about 6 months now. I retired from the city of Yelm but it didn't take, it was like 2.5 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me, I see another of our commissioners joining us there online, John. Hi, John. Well, okay, thank you, Grant.
Yeah. So one of the things I've been tasked with is to help be our staff liaison with the Thurston County Climate Action Steering Committee. So Councilmember Cox is our representative, elected representative. Councilmember Vasquez is the alternate. And I've been working with them on the staff level. So this has been a project that's been going on for about 3 or 4 years, looking at climate change and what we can do in Thurston County as a region to try to change what's happening and act. They went through a huge planning process.
Can you speak just a little bit louder?
I do have I'm a soft talker. So went through a huge planning process over the course of about 2 years to develop goals and policies for the region and some climate action goals to achieve, work towards carbon reduction mostly. That plan was adopted by all the jurisdictions, Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Thurston County last year. And the committee is now moving into implementation. So we've been gathering a bunch of information about forestry for carbon sequestration and forests. And that'll be the next round as the committee looks at the data, looks at what can be done, compares what we expect to happen with the goals and the achievements we're trying to make as a region, and then figure out which ones to start implementing first and working on first. So that's kind of where they're at right now. That's a big lift for elected officials who have a lot of distractions in their life. So they just established, or are in the process of establishing, a working group based on community members to help them kind of sort through all the different implementation options and make recommendations back to them. The reason I'm here tonight is the steering committee specifically requested that we have members who may be highly impacted by climate change, but underrepresented in the rest of the committee. You know, we've got a strong interest from climate action advocates, from PSE and the power generation and fossil fuel industry, but that's a piece that the steering committee really wanted to make sure that we had on the board and the voice was heard. So that's what I'm here. Shannon included in your packet the announcement for the steering committee. And I guess what my ask is tonight is just get the word out. And if there's anybody that you know or would like to do yourself, we'd be happy to have you. So it's open till I believe the first part of June, and then there'll be making selections based on after that. And one of the things that they've done, and I really appreciate, is to make it more accessible to everybody. Any member who's not paid to be there, like I'm paid to be there, gets a $50 per day per diem to participate. So that hopefully help expand our pool a little bit. So, did I miss anything? Or was that about?
Can you tell us a little bit about the meeting and the terms?
No, because they're really kind of sorting through that right now. They typically, we've been virtual. That's one of the commitments that they've made so far, is to not do a lot of driving, try not to be part of the problem ourselves. There is some talk about going to a hybrid location, but there'll always be the virtual opportunity. Looking at probably one meeting a month with a lot of staff support from the Thurston Regional Planning Council. Allison Osterberg and Casey Mock are the two planners assigned to the project, and they're the project leads. So.
And are you looking for the Lacey reps on this, or is there a Lacey meeting and then a Thurston County meeting?
No, it's a regional committee that Lacey's a part of, and these are general locations. We don't have jurisdictional affiliations on the working
Oh,
group.
okay.
They are looking for like somebody from the industry, somebody from a climate action advocate, and also the underrepresented. So more of a regional nature at the work group level.
Do we have any information or data about, you said people who would be highly, or who are more highly impacted, where those locations would be, or who those people?
We suspect it's the lower income, economically hardship people. And those that don't have the, that may rely on fossil fuels to get around and would be impacted by some of the ways to get to the goals could be highly impactful on the cost of transportation, for example. So we just want to make sure that voice gets heard, particularly with the climate advocates who are, wanting to do a lot right now and for good reason, but we have to be thoughtful about this.
My question is along the same lines. You talked about all the work that's gone into this and how long this group has been meeting and working. Has there been an analysis made of the whole climate impact here in Thurston County, aside from who's most impacted, but to what degree do we have practices going on that has our county's carbon footprint, or whatever it is we're trying to decrease? An analysis that tells us where we are, so as we insert some changes, what difference are we making?
Yep, it does. The climate action plan itself, which I believe was linked, on the agenda, does have the baseline data about where we're at. Unfortunately, in fact, the steering committee meeting was right before this meeting. So one of the things they rolled out was a dashboard on kind of what the trends have been in the past, and moving forward, we'll be able to see, if there is a goal for carbon emissions, we'll show that and where we're at now. But unfortunately, what we're finding is a lot of the data is not very fresh. So for example, a lot of the carbon emission stuff is from 2019. That's the latest data that we have. So the staff up there are still looking at other ways to get the data, and that may be a little more recent, so we can get ahead of the trends a little bit. But yeah, there's and on TRPC's website, the dashboard is there now, so you can actually get to it and kind of see at least 2019 where we were at.
So is the work group, the advisory group, looking beyond carbon emissions, like deforestation and all of those things that are impacting the atmosphere?
Yep.
So all that is not just transportation.
Nope.
Carbon emissions,
Absolutely correct.
fireplaces and wood burning and all of that. So if I go to this dashboard, I should be able to see the various contributing factors to the climate problem here in Thurston County.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. And the plan itself has, kind of it identifies the biggest producers and the biggest potential good work to be done. So we kind of know what the big things are. We need to figure out how to get there and implement some of this stuff. And that's where the work group comes in, is how to, is it regulation? Is it incentives? Is it, something else that we haven't thought of yet? But in fact, one of the presentations today, which was kind of fascinating, was about legacy forest stands in Capitol Forest and the stress that they're under from DNR in timber sales. So that's a big part of it.
Because this is a huge problem. And, it's not as simple as transportation and carbon emissions. There's been a lot of concern lately about so much clear cutting going on for housing development purposes. Just moonscapes being created, whole forests disappearing. Those are the plants that absorb, what we're emitting, and if the trees are gone, so the public policy impact on trying to mitigate this climate change is no small item to be approaching.
You are absolutely correct. And that's gonna be a big, one of the first lifts is gonna be a carbon sequestration study to see what we can do in Thurston County to keep that from happening and make sure that, and, not to dive too deep, but I do like this stuff. That's different, it's a regional issue. Climate change doesn't recognize city limit boundaries or county boundaries or national boundaries. But at least regionally, we all have our piece of the puzzle that we can accomplish. And for cities, honestly, one of the things that we can do, and biggest bang for the buck, is what we're seeing in Lacey, which is densification and providing more people on smaller lots in apartments and condos, and alternate forms of housing. The county's piece on that is more difficult because that's where the big opportunity is for carbon sequestration and reforestation.
So one of the dashboard items, and I didn't have a chance to go on that link to look at it. Does this report also include something on who are the worst offenders, commercial employers, developers? Does it list who are the worst offenders?
It identifies the worst offenders not as an individual or a company, but kind of the industry.
Right,
So,
right.
one of the big opportunities that we're looking at right now is electrification of new homes over use of natural gas or other fuel types. And just there, that's a big discussion that has policy discussion that has to take place on, is it everybody? Is it just new houses, or do we try to retrofit? But that's one of the areas, the biggest opportunity for change is in how we heat our homes and businesses.
So as I understand, the emphasis you're making here is that there is a real interest in wanting to make sure that there is a cross-section of the community represented in this work.
Absolutely.
So that, whatever comes out the other end, there's not been adverse impact on
Right.
some groups over others.
That there's justice in the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Environmental justice.
Environmental justice.
Okay. Thank you.
One more thing to add on is that they're also looking for youth members as well, and they've reached out to our youth council, and so we'll certainly be looking to have a liaison for this also moving forward for the youth council.
So it's all good stuff. And, as a planner, and Shannon knows, everything's related to everything. So we try not to look at, climate change as just a piece, because it does affect transportation, it affects agriculture, forestry, everything. So trying to keep everything in context and making sure we do it the right way.
We've talked in here about an equity tool for a database that we could track a number of things. And I saw a really interesting piece from some California city where they had a view, air view of this neighborhood, this neighborhood, this neighborhood, and the green, how green this was, how desolate this was, and who lived here and who lived here. And so that, that's the kind of things you're looking at too.
Yep, absolutely.
Who has trees in their neighborhood, who has shade, who doesn't.
Yep. And how do we do better moving forward in developing those communities as best we can?
The other big thing I think might impact is all these big warehouses, and what does that? It deflects sun, it heats stuff up, should we paint those green? Yeah, there's a lot of acreage in those places in Thurston County.
So Commissioner Clay, just a little bit more background. The city does do a tree canopy study on occasion, and most recently we did one in 2020, correct, Grant?
Correct, yep.
And what is the typical update cycle for those?
We're actually, as part of this group, the jurisdictions are kind of banding together to try to do that more often, like every year, every other year, using the same methodology and doing it all at once countywide, so we can all get that picture, you know, that in a whole. So that would be the ultimate goal, and we're talking about that right now to start maybe next year.
So Commissioner Clay, just going back to that equity tool, as we continue to have conversations about that development, that would certainly be a data set in the future that might be available to have as a layer in an equity tool. In addition, it sounded like you were interested in a heat map too of
Yeah,
areas.
Yeah. So,
Well, glad to see that this work is moving right along. Hopefully it's not too little too late, but better late than never, right? Right. Very good. But thank you, Grant.
Thank you. Good,
It's
good to meet you all.
Yes.
Thank you, Grant.
Yep, I'm gonna go catch a bus.
No, please. by
Oh, you
all
gonna
means.
catch a bus? That's good.
Thanks a lot.
You bet. So our next business item is a flag policy review. Glad to see that this work is moving right along. I'm sorry. Hopefully it's not too little too late, but better late than never.
You know what? It was the meeting had just kicked in and started repeating itself. So I think we're all good now. It was about I guess 10 seconds behind. So I think we're okay. That was on our YouTube stream.
Oh, okay, okay, very good. So item 4B, flag policy review.
Good evening, everyone. We're here to take a look at the city's existing flag policy, and I'm going to pass around some hard copies here that have all of the materials that we're going to review for policy. So for this item, as well as the next item, which is a proclamation review. And so what I want to do is just start with some background. Number one, the city has the Lacey City Council City Policy Manual and Procedures. And this is really a document that organizes all of the city's policies as well as some of the city's programs. And Commissioner Stolberg, if you just want to leave that right there,
Okay.
that's absolutely fine. I can pick that up. And so in this document, you can find this online, the full document. I've given you pieces of the document today, but I can certainly send out the full one for you all to take a look at here in just a second. It provides everything on information, you know, how meetings are run at the city with the city council, to programs like our Spirit Award, which is one of the largest awards that any community member here in the city can receive. So what we're here to take a look at today, and this is just really starting the conversation, are two sections of the city's policies and procedures manual. And the first one we're going to take a look at is the flag policy, which is found in section 512. And if you're looking at our packets here tonight, it is included on, well, actually I don't have the full page numbers, but if you go about 10 pages in, you'll start to see the staff report for the city policy, flag policy. So just a brief overview of the flag policy. So the city's flag policy applies to all city-owned locations where the city flag is displayed. The city can choose to fly a different flag in lieu of the City of Lacey flag, but any decision to fly a different flag, it takes the quorum of the council. So the council must approve it, and that has to be done at a regular city council meeting. And it needs to have a specific time, or it could be something that happens on an annual occurrence. So to date, what is approved in the policy is that the city will fly the sister city flag when there is a delegation visit from our sister city, which is in Poland. And then second, it'll fly the pride flag in June from June 1st to June 30th. Those are the two approved alternate flags other than the City of Lacey flag currently in the policy. One thing just to clarify that I didn't touch on is that a flag that is flown at a city flagpole has to be owned by the city. So our sister city flags and the pride flags that we fly are all purchased by the city of Lacey and stay with the city of Lacey. So where are the city's flagpoles? We have actually quite a number of them. We have them outside. I don't know if you saw them as you were walking into City Hall. We have the 3 flagpoles, which are shown here on the screen. And you can see in this red circle is where the city of Lacey flag is located. So you have the Washington state flag, you have the United States flag with the POW MIA flag right below it, and then the city of Lacey's flag with the city of Lacey's logo on it. We also have flagpoles located at the Public Works Shop, which is frequently known as the shop. So if you hear me reference the shop in the future, that's what we're talking about. The Regional Athletic Complex, also known as the RAC. Lacey Civic Plaza, which if you're coming off of Interstate 5, you can see it right next to the mall as you're exiting. And then the Woodland Community Center, which is also next to the Senior Center. Those locations display City of Lacey flags. And then in addition to that, there is one more flagpole, which was not mentioned in your staff report, and that is at the homecoming statue near the Home Depot. There is another flagpole there, but given the height of the flagpole, it is only displaying 2 flags, and that is the United States flag and the Washington state flag. So some background on statutory requirements for flag display. So here in Washington, code cities, which the city of Lacey is a code city, which means that it follows RCW 35A. Must prominently install, display, and maintain the US and Washington state flags on its city buildings. In addition, every city and town and county in Washington must display the US flag, the Washington state flag, and the POW MIA flag near its principal building or buildings on the following days. You can see there are a number of days in which that POW MIA flag is to be flown, and that's all from RCW 120. You can see here we've got a picture of Lacey Civic Plaza just to give you another idea of where the city's flagpoles are. And you can see here we've got once again the Lacey City flag. You've got the US flag, the POW MIA flag is right below it, and then the Washington state flag. Now, not all locations the city has flags. Are there 3 flagpoles? As I mentioned previously, there are multiple locations where there are only 1 flagpole in the city. So for flag etiquette, generally following the flag code, which you can see is provided there, courts have interpreted that the flag code is advisory only and there are no penalties for violating it, but just to be aware that the flag code is out there and we do follow the flag code, and basic tenets of the flagpole are that the US flag should be displayed every year, every day of the year except for days of inclement weather on or near the main administration building of every public institution. Flying the US flag only during daylight hours. However, if there are lights and it illuminates it, you can continue to fly them throughout night. Flying in the highest position of honor and having no other flags fly higher. And then when you're putting on the flag, making sure you hoist it briskly and then bring it down also briskly. So in addition to that flag code, there's also some Washington state flag etiquette, and this is from the Washington Secretary of State. And it says that the Washington state flag should be displayed in the highest honor following the US flag, which again should be the highest honor, and the flags of other nations. So if there was another nation flag being displayed, it would be below that. It should be displayed in a higher position of honor than flags of other states, counties, cities, or other entities. So if there was a flag pole that had the US flag and then the state of Washington flag, the city of Lacey flag would go below those 2 flags in that order. When the US, Washington state, and POW MIA flags are flown on a single pole, the US flag should be on top, followed by the POW MIA flag, and then the state flag, which is what is shown on the slide deck here. And if there are 2 poles, the POW MIA flag should be flown under the US flag, while the state flag flies on a secondary pole. So I'll take a pause here. I know I just kind of provided a pretty high level of overview, so I'm just going to stop and just see if there's any questions right now. And if there are any questions throughout the presentations, please feel free to ask them. All right.
As these, go right ahead, Alanis.
Oh, I just said you covered everything really well, so.
I was just gonna say, as these agenda items come up, I often try and think, how does that relate to the Equity Commission? So maybe you'll cover that.
Yes,
Let's see.
and that's exactly what we're about to get into. So
Right.
all of that was more of just the background
Right.
information. So we all know kind of what exists as far as the policy. And then, you know, for this group, what we're really here to get some input and some consideration is on some potential policy changes in alignment with the task of the Commission on Equity here. So, like I mentioned, when you walk into City Hall, one of the first things you see are our flags. Flags are often displayed to be representative, you know, for example, the US flag of the United States of America. They provide a very visible statement of who and what a group of people embody. They serve as prominent features, again, as individuals walk into our buildings. And they could provide an opportunity to demonstrate and reflect the city's commitment to, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, you know, one of the things that the Commission on Equity is specifically tasked with is identifying and advancing opportunities that will create a more welcoming community. And so, Chair Jackson, to go back to your question of how does this connect with the Commission on Equity, what I'm here tonight is to get some input on if there are ways that this visible demonstration, you know, the flagpoles specifically, we might want to consider in the future to make the city more welcoming. And then if there are other ideas as far as, you know, visible demonstrations as well that the commission would like to discuss, this is a great opportunity to do so. So as I mentioned, currently in the policy, and what I'm about to go over here are just some ideas and some thoughts to start as a beginning point for this discussion, but I really am interested in hearing just broadly what the commission's ideas and thoughts are on this subject matter. So currently, the city does fly what is known as the rainbow flag for the month of June to align with Pride Month. The city first did this back in 2016, and then it didn't display it in 2017. However, in 2018, it's codified that policy in that policy manual that we are currently reviewing and standardized that the Pride rainbow flag would be flying from June 1st to June 30th. So I provided an example of the Pride rainbow flag. It's designed to represent the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, queer, asexual, and all other identities that fall into the LGBTQIA+ community. And you can see that the flag was created in 1978 by Gilbert Baker, and that there are meanings to the stripes, and those are life, healing, sunlight, nature, harmony, and peace and spirit. So looking forward, a question for the council to consider is, it's currently, in policy that we will fly the rainbow flag. However, there are other flags that have been more representative of the greater community. And so one thing just to get some input on from the commission is if it would be something that the commission would like to look into possibly flying another flag such as the Progress Pride flag, which, like the rainbow flag before it, represents all those LGBTQIA+ communities. And it also recognizes centers and support voices that have historically been marginalized members of the queer community, with a specific emphasis on people of color, the transgender community, and community members lost or living with AIDS and HIV. And you can see that's been incorporated very prominently on the left-hand side of the flag with the chevron that is facing forward. This flag was created in 2018 by Daniel Cusar. Any questions?
So the question is, for the month that is flown, would this replace the Pride flag? Only that one would be flown, or would it be Pride flag flown, then another time this flag is flown?
That's a great question, Vice Chair Brown. And, just given the number of flagpoles, that is something we need to consider is the logistics of what flags are flying, especially given the flag code and then Washington State flag etiquette. And so really I'm seeking kind of the Commission on Equity's recommendations moving forward, whether or not, to fly 2 flags or to fly one of those flags, or perhaps just to leave it as currently written in the policy.
I think this would be great as kind of like an updated version of our pride flag, because it incorporates a couple more community members within that flag. So yeah, I think that both of them are great, but this one specifically represents Pride Month a lot more specifically, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is a more representative of the current community, the way the current community identifies themselves. And I would be all for switching the old pride flag for the new one.
This was developed in 2018, so I guess my question is, how familiar is the LGBTQIA community with this new flag? Or would there be like, what is this? Has it been communicated? Is it widely known since it's only, a few years old?
Yeah.
I'm sure people, the broad like spectrum of society doesn't know like the specifics of it, but just looking at it as a straight ally, I can see that the blue and the pink are they represent the transgender community, which you don't see on the side that isn't from 2018. So just from an outside perspective, it doesn't really like, I'm not like, oh yeah, this color means this color means that. But that is something I noticed. And as a brown person, I also noticed the brown. So I don't know, yeah. I think both flags are great ways to represent the community. Just having this little extra flair might be something to consider.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good idea. Would the city do like an announcement or something? Put out some information about the flag and what it is, so people do know.
Why it's different.
Right, yeah, so they can
Updated
see, get
version.
some information, because not everybody's
More
gonna know.
inclusive, right.
Yeah, Commissioner Stolberg, with any of the flags, I would certainly envision that we would have some sort of outreach and communication on our website. But also, we're going to review proclamations too coming up here. And oftentimes we have, outside groups or, commissioners come to receive the proclamations. And that could be another opportunity for education and awareness from a group outside of the city or a commissioner.
I think
Go ahead, Amy.
I think this is very powerful in this day and age when trans people are very targeted, as are brown and black people in the US. That it's a dangerous time for people with those colors. So I think it would be really meaningful for to the community, to the gay community, to have this flown. And then also it's great to be, everybody knows the rainbow by now, and then they're curious about, well, what else? And then it might start conversations.
The way that the rainbow flag has a definition of the color, the chevron going in there, are there different definitions for those colors? Pink, blue, brown, black? I mean, what do they stand for? I mean, these are strong things like life, healing, sunlight, nature. So for those 4 additional colors to have similar word meanings, so that it's not only visual, but it's has a narrative tied into it as well. So whatever is the definition for those 4 other colors going in there, to add it to whatever policy statement or whatever is on the city's website or whatever. So as the education process begins for people to understand this new flag that's coming along, those other 4 colors has meaning too.
And Chair Jackson, I know Commissioner Blackburn just did a really good job of overviewing the communities that they represent. But
Mhm.
certainly if there are other meetings too behind, just some of the colors on the flags that were created, we can certainly take a look into that and provide that as part of the education
Mhm.
outreach.
Jonathan has this.
And I know Commissioner Blackburn did as well.
I was gonna say, it might be a stretch, but I feel like it would be a great way to show our allyship to the LGBTQ community by maybe doing some sort of celebration regarding raising this flag. Like I imagine, maybe somewhere here or at the Capitol to raise the flag and maybe open up to open mic or have, some commission members explain, to people who come to the flag raising, what these colors mean and why it matters so much to our community as we raise it, and maybe we could even incorporate that into the annual Pride Parade that we have in Olympia.
John?
Yes, I was actually just going to, I guess, weigh in that there's a lot of things that are problematic with this flag as well as the original Pride flag. However, displaying this updated version of the Progress flag versus the original one is still, as the name and the moniker implies, progress in the right direction. Of course, there's still a lot of intense conversations happening about the representation or the more representation on this flag, but there's still exclusion of some other parties. But I think that this is still symbolizing us moving in the correct direction. And I think that us displaying that is quite very much the least we can do to display allianship with that community or those communities that are represented by that flag.
Okay, thank you.
So it sounds like there's consensus to take a look into this a little bit further and come back to the commission with some recommendations as far as updates to the policy.
I would, but but it is almost June. That is one thing. I don't guess that it could move that fast, like that we could send a request to the city council that this one be up this year. That's too fast.
That is correct,
Yeah.
Commissioner Clay. That is too fast. This would more than likely be something that would be updated in anticipation of 2023. Especially because, as I mentioned earlier, the requirement is that the city would have to own the flag. So there would
Right,
have to
and
be a
purchase it.
purchase of the flag moving forward.
Okay.
But certainly, as we're looking at policy updates, in future years, that could certainly be the case.
Would this policy update be just for this flag, or is this to be able to consider, I don't know what else we would do, but other raising flags for other communities aside from this at different times of the year?
Yeah, so we're gonna go over a couple other flags, Commissioner Stolberg, as part of tonight's presentation and discussion, but then also, interested in hearing what are some other thoughts and ideas, as we take a look at this. So what I'm coming here today in front of the commission are just some ideas that we've contemplated and wanted to have a discussion with the Commission on Equity. That doesn't mean that there aren't other things that we should be looking at.
Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking is if we start doing this, there could be other communities that wonder like, well, how come they don't fly a flag for, whatever?
Mhm.
And is there a process for them to how would we decide who to fly, what communities to fly a flag for and what ones not to?
And that's a great question, Commissioner Stolberg. Currently, the policy, as I just showed you and as you have in front of you, says that the council has to come, to a recommendation and take a vote to fly a flag. So, having some sort of process, if there are other community members who are interested in flying a flag, that could be something we take a look at as we're looking, at some policy changes as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just envisioning in my head, so community members would probably then go to the council and speak at a council meeting about why they would want their flag.
So
raised?
currently what the policy states is that the council members have to arrive there independently.
Oh, okay.
And that's, again, something that we can, take a look at, and so you all have the current policy in front of you and in that staff report. So that is certainly something we could look at and talk about as a group, is if it might make sense to have further discussions for the council on a policy or procedure to make some recommendations on that.
But as it stands, this commission can make recommendations about flags.
This is an advisory body, right? And so the recommendation is going to be on the policy, right? To say, hey, we're tasked with making this a more inclusive, welcoming community where, we continue conversations that are, critical on, race and equity. And so that certainly, meets some of the tasks that this commission has.
And we could be the way for those people to get their voices heard if they want their flag to be flown. So like on our website, we could maybe create some sort of pop-up that encourages people to suggest or recommend flags for certain communities they feel like are underrepresented. And, maybe that could be people's opportunity to, give us the ideas that the community wants to then forward to the council.
But the policy would have to change because if the council members have to arrive at that independently, I mean, it's not really independent if we're telling them
Right, yeah.
about it.
Yes, and that's again, something we can take in front of the council and say, this is the current language, the recommendation would be to change that with this policy, and it sounds like, what Commissioner Blackburn was just saying was to have some sort of kind of vetting with the Commission on Equity before it proceeded to the full council for consideration. And that is something that happens, with other advisory bodies. So, Grant Beck was just here. A lot of planning items go in front of the Planning Commission before they go in front of the full commission for full city council. And similarly with other advisory bodies like the Historic and Parks boards as well.
On a slightly different issue, but it's a flag issue. I know we're talking about the city policy, flags that the city endorses or owns or that kind of thing. But more and more around this town, I'm seeing some very offensive flags. The city's not flying them. They're on big up trucks and in the last year or so, it's just horrible. It's just horrible. The hatred that's coming through flags and what these mean flags represent. And I know it's another whole different thing for the city to be saying who can and cannot fly a personal flag on their personal vehicle. But as we're talking about an equitable community and people feeling welcome and people feeling included, boy, there's some stuff going on that it's a flag, but it's not the city's flag policy. But that concerns me as a member of the Equity Commission. How offensive it is to a lot of people for some of the flag flying that's going on. They're not up flag poles per se, except I'm beginning to see stuff in people's yards.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
In
there
their
are some people that
personal,
are
and the message that's being sent of hatred and you're not wanted here, and that's another whole can of worms for the city to take on, but it's a flag issue. It's a flag issue. Just a block up from where I live, there's a store. Just all kinds of flags in their windows, and it's offensive. It sends a message to the community that we're working hard to try and, it doesn't say welcome, it says stay out. We don't want you here
Don't
for
tread on
certain
me.
people.
Don't tread on me.
Don't tread on me. And so that's a different issue, but since we're on the issue of flags, I thought I'd raise it.
Yeah, Chair Jackson, the city has what is called the sign code, and that's part of our zoning code. And effectively, the city can enforce sizes, but not messages.
I know, it's a hard one, but it's a new thing I've seen around here.
Yeah.
It's not always been the case, but I'm seeing stuff I've never seen before, I was in the Costco parking lot unloading things to my trunk. And a white gentleman walked up and said, "Step back, ma'am." And here comes this truck rolling through with this Trump flag and "Don't tread on me." And said, "Step back, ma'am,"
Wow.
And I hadn't noticed it yet. I'm focusing on trying to unload my car. You know, when it gets by me, it's ready to rev up the engine. And the gentleman was just very kind. He said, step back, ma'am. That's, you know, that's not good. That's not good. So I just tossed that out for whatever other kind of conversations you might be having with city council people. But that's a new situation around here that it can't increase. I mean, I don't know what to do about it. I don't know where to take it, but it's an observation on my part that's just really increasing. It's increasing. It's not the city's flag. City don't own those. They are private, but they're sending some messages counter to what we're trying to send to people. I don't know if others have had any similar experiences or observed, you know, these very offensive flags flying around, but it's out of control.
Yeah, it's pretty evident, you know, and traveling on the highway, you know, you see small convoys, you know, and I make sure that I move over and get away from them because, you know, there are road rage issues running you off the road. There are other issues that have transpired as a result of that. And in various communities, especially in the rural community, you get more of that. And so, you know, having to be, you know, cautious and smart, you know, not being brave. I'm going to confront them. I'm going to take it on because it doesn't end well, but to be smart and vigilant, I think is probably is important. But yeah, we face that on a daily basis. Yeah.
I think the whole saying behind it has kind of fueled a confidence in people's ignorance, especially my age. I remember hearing a lot about how at the protests at North Thurston, their school was nice enough to let them protest inside during lunch and passing periods. And as they were doing that, there were kids shouting, Trump 2020, Trump 2020 at them. It's 2022, you guys.
Yeah.
First off. And you know what, that the reason why I connected that was because these flags say Trump 2020 on them. And that's why these kids are saying it, even though it's 2022. They see all these people, maybe their parents, you know, carrying these flags around that say Trump 2020, and they're just, you know, kind of monkey say monkey doing. And yeah, so these flags definitely play a big role in some ignorance within our community. I actually had a woman scream the N-word at with a hard R at me at PetSmart last week and then say Trump 2020 as she drove off.
It's happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this conversation can go, Shannon. It had nothing to do with this, but it's a flag issue that's really becoming a problem in a community where we're trying to send a message of welcome and inclusiveness. And this handful of ignorant folk that's countering all that effort. So enough said, my point made. Thank you. Then item 4C.
So Sherry Jackson, sorry, there's a couple more things I want to run through on the flag policy to
I'm
get the feedback
sorry.
from this commission. So another item for the commission to consider is flying the Juneteenth flag. So we are working on a collaboration with the Fred U. Harris Masonic Lodge, which I know Vice Chair Brown is going to give us a update on here shortly. But you know, just for anybody who might be watching this, the Fred U. Harris Masonic Lodge has been putting on this event in the greater Thurston County area for the past 40 years. This will be their 41st celebration, and they have graciously let us collaborate with them. And so we are helping them with some communication. We're also providing, you know, some stage and other materials at the celebration, but they are going to be doing all of the cooking. They're going to host some games and then some speakers as well. Including the City of Lacey's Mayor, Andy Ryder, and Tumwater's Mayor, Debbie Sullivan, and I believe also Congresswoman Strickland will be there as well, providing comments. Also, beginning this year, Juneteenth is an official holiday of the federal government, the state government, as well as the City of Lacey. So, in consideration of this really profound, significant holiday celebrating the emancipation of slavery, and also all of, the dark healing and hope that goes on with that. Another thing that the city is requesting some feedback on is, potentially flying the Juneteenth flag, which, as I previously mentioned, we've got the Pride flag currently also flying in June, so there could be some logistical issues, and I've provided a couple of options potentially in the packet for the Commission on Equity to consider. But before we get into that, I just want to pause and just kind of check in with the commission on this possibility as well.
Is this a national, nationally recognized flag or something local?
This is a nationally recognized flag, and thank you for that reminder, Commissioner Clay. There's one more slide that talks a little bit about the flag. So the flag was created by Ben Haith, founder of the National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation in 1997, and he collaborated with Janine Graff on creating the flag. And so the symbols incorporated into the flag represent the white star being the Star of Texas, which was the last remaining enslaved people which were freed in 1865. And then the burst represents that new beginning for Black African Americans in the United States. The red arc being the new opportunities for Black African and African Americans on the horizon. And then the red, white, and blue being colors of the American flag, and a reminder that slavery did exist in the United States, and that there are, descendants of slaves in the United States.
Very
Just out of
striking.
curiosity, the Prince Hall Masons, are we referring to the religion of Freemasonry or
What was that?
the Prince Hall
Masons.
Masons?
So the Masons are a religious and social group.
Okay, yeah,
It's
just
a
out of
Masonic
curiosity.
order. Mhm.
Okay, nice.
What I think was different is that this is a national holiday now versus, Pride Month, Ladies Month, Cancer Awareness Month. This is a national holiday and a new national holiday. So I think it would be appropriate, to fly this flag, and it's an official flag. If there was a national holiday for President's Day, same thing, a Veterans Day flag, national holiday. So I think it carries more merit and meaning because it is a national holiday.
And I think to fly this flag on Juneteenth Day, the day of celebration, we're just talking about a day, conjures up conversation, conjures up dialogue. Juneteenth hit the scene last year on a national basis in a big way, and folk were just shocked. How long has this been around? Where did this come from? Why haven't I ever heard of this? What's this all about? So to actually see the flag flying on that particular day that would go along with the other kinds of coordination and collaboration, I think would be a very good thing. And the explanation of the symbols, I think, is very helpful.
And if even not this one, a flag at all to celebrate diversity at any time of the year, we have an excuse, whether it's February or Martin Luther King Jr. Day or Juneteenth. Something to represent the power of diversity in our country is an important flag to have.
So the question is, are we able to fly it current year?
So again, like I said with Commissioner Clay, might not be able to move that swiftly, Vice Chair Brown, but certainly want to try to.
Well, they can, the city council can approve it, do it this one year, and then go in and ratify it and codify it for the next year, like they did the flag from 17. Then 18 they didn't. Why didn't they fly it in 18? But then they.
If I had to guess, I'd say they didn't because they probably got pushback, and so they had to kind of revisit the policy, right, and actually codify, like you're saying.
So there was a desire on the council at the time to have a policy in place before they flew other flags. And so they, in 2016, it had just followed the massacre that had happened in Orlando. And then there were council members across a quorum that wanted to see a policy in place in the future. And that's why it didn't fly in 17. And then once that policy was passed in 18, it has been flown every year since then.
So the question, with the advent of it becoming a national holiday, can they say, we're gonna move forward and fly this year and we'll codify it for the future? Can someone make that proposal and it can be voted up or down? I think by the council. Put them on.
Mr. Council.
As I hear Shannon explaining our role as an advisory group, if that's something we want to pass back to the city council as a piece of advice from this commission, go for it.
I think we should make an exception.
Say yay or nay.
Ask them to make an exception.
For this
and
first
they can say
year
yay or
of
nay.
this national holiday.
If they can purchase it by then.
So yeah, and that would be
That's pretty
I certainly can move forward with a recommendation from this council in front of or in front of this commission and to the front of the city council. The other logistical challenge would be, can we purchase a flag that is large enough to fit on, what we have? So I can certainly look into that as well, Vice Chair Brown, and see what our turnaround time for it is. But what I'm hearing from the Commission on Equity is to create something to bring in front of the council for flying the flag on Juneteenth this year, and specifically on the actual day of Juneteenth. And I know that our event is on the 18th. So
Juneteenth is 19th,
how does the commission feel about that weekend?
the whole weekend.
It'd be great. And I don't know how big the flags are, but I've seen several order blanks commercial outlets advertising that flag. I don't know how big it is as far as going up a flagpole, but I do know that flag is out there commercially in places that can be ordered.
Surprisingly, they're actually fairly large.
Yeah.
They are 4 feet by 6 feet.
Yeah,
That's pretty-
yeah. As I say, I don't know what sizes they are, but I've seen that flag being advertised for sale in different catalogs, and it's a whole
Amazon.
new market that's opened up for Juneteenth. T-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, you wouldn't believe it, but the flag was there, yeah.
Yeah.
Last year even.
Would the city do a proclamation for this also?
Yes, and that's actually something we're going to take a look at as part of our proclamation review, Commissioner Stolberg. The city did do a proclamation last year, and they are going to be doing a proclamation this year. And so we'll get into that a little bit more as we move into that next item, but I still have a few more.
That's good. You're never waiting for your clue to move on.
But I just want to make sure that I've heard the consensus on the Commission on Equity is to try to move forward with flying it for at least the weekend of Juneteenth for this year, and then considering it for future policy codification.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it would be for that weekend, it would replace the progressive pride flag, because you can't have too many flags.
Well, and there are a number of options that are provided in there. And so when we come back to review the policy, that would be great to get some kind of direction from the Commission on Equity on, some recommendations for flying it. So if you turn to page 8 of that staff report, and it's also provided in the packet, I believe on the second page, there are a couple of, potential options, again, just given the logistics of having only so much space on a flagpole to fly a flag. So a couple of examples, and I don't know if I have gotten them all, so I would certainly entertain any ideas from the Commission on Equity. But one would be to, fly the pride flag, whether it is the rainbow or the progressive for half of the month, and then the Juneteenth flag for the second half, or to display, again, the pride flag the first, second, and fourth week, leaving the third week for flying the Juneteenth flag, or to fly the Juneteenth flag at the rack the entire month, given that that is where the event occurs. So there are a couple of options there that if the commission could just take a look at that over the next month and consider, we can return to for a future conversation.
Yeah, I think we just,
Future conversation.
yeah, do the Juneteenth weekend.
Mhm.
And then next year, actually look at the policy that's more permanent.
And Vice Chair, when you mean next year, we'll be looking now in planning for next year.
But are you saying by that, Shannon, that this won't take effect this year in any way?
Chair Jackson, I'm saying that I will try to get this on in front of a committee and then the council to fly the flag for this weekend, for the weekend of the event.
Right, because
but
we
the
don't
actual-
meet again as a commission. Juneteenth will have happened by then. Yeah.
And then making these other sort of decisions or
Later.
recommendations.
For next year. Yeah.
Next meeting, we'll pick that back up.
Correct, yeah, so we would continue this conversation and, start looking at some recommendations for like updated policy and having some further discussion and dialogue on that.
And how about the tribal flag?
Well, there we go.
There we go.
I think Commissioner Clay is gonna present on this slide.
Sorry.
So another thing for this group to consider is displaying the Nisqually tribe and the Squaxin tribe flags during Native American and Indigenous Heritage Month, which is in November.
So was there one or two flags?
So there are two tribes, so two flags respectively. And so certainly there would need to be some conversation on how the logistics of that would work as well. One recommendation could be to fly for half of the month and then the other for the other half, and in places where there might be space concurrently. But also I think the really important thing to make mention of here, that this would be, should these tribes consent to flying those flags. So really just having those conversations and seeing if they're interested as well.
Yeah, and a question, is there a Native American and Indigenous heritage flag?
Yeah, Vice Chair Brown, I looked into that and I didn't see a specific flag, but I do know that these tribes do have their own flags.
Okay.
As nations, they have their own flags.
Commissioner Stelberg and I went to the Native Cafe with the North Thurston School District this past week. And I heard a number of people saying their flag they saw their flag at their school and how much that meant to them. And so I think it is important. And I don't know, I think about the museum, will that be a new place to have flagpoles?
Absolutely, that would be a new location that would have
That is a really
flagpoles.
cool location because a lot of traffic back and forth, but I think definitely we should consider this, maybe. Yeah, we're talking about 1 month, but I think could be a broader discussion too.
And Commissioner Clay, just to provide you on an update too, since you brought up the museum, I know that they have been working on a land acknowledgement to be outside of the museum and then on, future historical markers as well. I have reached out to both Nisqually and the Squaxin to talk more broadly about just general land acknowledgements at the city as well. So hopefully that'll be coming before the Commission on Equity here shortly.
Okay.
All right, so I actually think, Chair Jackson, that we are at the end of item B, unless there's other conversation that the commissioners wanted to have regarding two flags and the flag policy.
I just wanted to kind of revisit the topic of the progressive pride flag really quick. Since Pride Month obviously is also during the month where Juneteenth occurs, I think that if we can mention the Progress Pride flag as well, since obviously the flag is intentionally trying to represent communities of color as well, I think that we'd be doing a disservice to that community as representation for the entire month by not including that in our recommendation as well as the Juneteenth flag.
Commissioner Hedger, just to make sure that I'm fully understanding, so making a request to the city council for flying that flag this year and then codifying it in policy in a later year?
Correct.
Thank you.
If it can be purchased.
That might be a little shorter timeline if I find some from June 1st to June 30th.
Right. If they're able to get it like, halfway through the month, then that is what it is, but at least we have that representation for that time period rather than none at all.
Got express shipping, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Or
Also, Commissioner Sauer still in the,
it'll just be
he's on
laying
it.
around on the shelf.
If you see some though in the store, let me know and I'll drive out there and I'll purchase them.
Yeah.
All right, so I just to go back and capture everything that I've heard is to go back to the council and try to get on a committee and then a council meeting for flying the Juneteenth flag during the weekend of Juneteenth, and then flying the progress flag, and then updating the policy to reflect flying those in future years.
For me, the Juneteenth is the most important to get done, but
Absolutely. But again, how can we represent, right, that the city is representing African Americans and those that identify as Black without considering our other modes of representation, I guess. A quick side note, I'm actually from Texas, and we celebrated Juneteenth in Texas growing up my entire life. However, like whenever Chair Jackson mentioned that, whenever the conversation became national, a lot of people were like, what is Juneteenth? I never heard of it. And I'm like, what do you mean? People don't celebrate that everywhere? I was completely caught off guard. Anyway, the point of my story is, even with all of that in my, obviously I don't identify as Black or African American, but very intimately familiar with the holiday celebration. Today was the first time I've ever seen that flag for Juneteenth. So I just want to share that anecdote as well.
And just out of curiosity, how did you see Juneteenth being practiced in Texas?
I'm glad you asked. Usually it was neighborhood or city conversations, or city celebrations. So like in the city park, there was like a cookout and like an interpretive exhibit. Keep in mind, I was pretty young whenever I moved from Texas, or at least parts of Texas that celebrated it, I should probably say. When I moved to the more rural portions of Texas, it wasn't really quite as widespread or celebrated, but it was at least discussed, which it sounds like is more than what's happening in most of the rest of the country until 2 ago, right? So I was genuinely surprised whenever I had family members that are like, I've never heard of this holiday before. I'm like, it's existed for like 200 years. What do you mean you never heard of it? So I was genuinely surprised. But no, of course, you have like the cookouts and the music and all, things that people like to go to and attend. But then you also had like the harder conversations of, why do we celebrate this? Where did it come from? Why do we call it Juneteenth? What does it mean? And then, who does it mean, or who's the meaning for, I guess.
Awesome.
So are we ready for 4C?
I'm ready. Is the commission ready?
Commissioner Sauer still as an attendee on the meeting, by the way.
What was that?
Commissioner Sauer, she's as an attendee still rather than a panelist.
Thank you, Commissioner Hedge, but I just let Commissioner Sauer in.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
All right, then we will move on to item 4C, which I'll start my presentation again. So again, going back to that policy manual, we're taking a look at another city council practice that is organized within that policy, and that is the proclamation policy. First of all, there are no state statutes that specifically refer to local governments and proclamations, so they're really at the discretion of the local government when and how to create proclamations. Typically, they are broad statements of support And you can see that there are actually procedures for the public wanting to request a proclamation, which was Commissioner Stolberg's question about the flag policy there earlier. And that is incorporated into Chapter 5, Section 9. And that's been provided to all of the commissioners in the staff report, as well as the printed materials that I just provided for you all. The city of Lacey, like I said, each city does this a little bit differently, but how the city of Lacey structures their proclamations is that they have 7 whereases. And the purpose of this is to allow all of the city council members to be able to read a whereas. So that way, if they choose to, they can all be represented in the proclamation. There are annual proclamations. So, what we're taking a look at right here is, somebody coming out from, let's say, an outside entity or organization and saying, I'd like a proclamation on this. There are also proclamations that the city just does on an annual basis, and we'll take a look at that here shortly. So I've provided in your packets a copy of a proclamation, and this was the 2021 Native American Heritage Month proclamation. I also provided the link to the YouTube video so you can take a look at kind of what a proclamation looks and feels like. Now, I will say that with the caveat of that was under COVID. Ideally, we would have people coming in from, community groups and accepting the proclamation, during a regular council meeting. So the one that I provided was remote. But if you come to the Juneteenth proclamation, which will be on June 16th, you'll be able to see that in person, how those typically go.
It's my birthday.
So like I said, I have provided the current proclamation and policy, and this might be a little bit hard to read, but if you open up the materials in front of you, just to kind of walk through what this looks like. So the person making the request should be a Lacey resident, and the request needs to not be political in nature. The policy says that they should not be political in nature, they shouldn't be controversial, and they should have a high degree of community interest and support. So a person from the public would come and make the request. The city asks that the request be made a couple of weeks in advance, and by a couple, I actually mean 4. That gives us time to get it onto the council's agenda, and then to also work with those organizations and entities to get the proclamation and make any edits or answer any questions that we might have about it, and then get it in front of the council. And then this would go in front of the council at a regularly scheduled council meeting, and most frequently at a regular meeting itself. As far as the policy for if this is coming from a member of the public, having somebody here to accept the proclamation in person. So when they are in person, to be here and they are allowed to say a couple of words, on whatever organization or entity that they're representing for the proclamation. The city retains the right to modify and edit as necessary, also ask questions, follow up on materials, and then to decide if it's right that the proclamation should be interested or not. There is an actual form that members of the public would fill out, and that is an application requesting a city proclamation. And then this would get funneled to the city manager's department and then eventually to the council for consideration, and then added on to a council meeting. And if not approved, the city would communicate, why that person was not approved for a proclamation or that entity or group. So looking at past proclamations of the city, if you open up the staff reports, there is Table A, and this lists all of the proclamations that the city has done from 2020 to the present. And most of the proclamations, as you're looking through that, are actually more annual. Less of them are coming from members of the public. You can see that there are repeating ones. For example, I believe it's Arbor Day is represented in both of 2020 and 2021, as well as 2022. So I bringing this in front of the Commission on Equity, because number one, this was something that was actually identified in the work plan as an item to take a look at. And number two, I believe it was Commissioner Blackburn that said, we should take a look at, heritage months and recognition days to see if there was a way to have that information, out and expressed in the community via the city of Lacey. And so that's why this item is here in front of the Commission on Equity tonight, is to consider, whether or not the commission would like to sponsor incorporating some more proclamations for heritage months and recognition days. And by sponsor, that doesn't mean that the Commission on Equity would be necessarily the group always, at the council meetings picking up the proclamation, but it'd be more of that the Commission on Equity recognizes that this would be something that would be beneficial to the city of Lacey, and then also to help connect with other organizations that might make for good individuals in the community to receive these proclamations. So I provided in Table B a list of commonly recognized heritage months and recognition days. And so I just really want to have a discussion with the Commission on Equity to see if there's any interest in incorporating more of these heritage and recognition days into proclamations moving forward. And this is just a commonly list. So if there are things that are missing too, that's something that the city is very interested in hearing more information on.
That's a broad category of people that kind of cut across all this. Seniors. I don't know if there's any senior recognition month or day or week or whatever. It cuts across all of this.
Yeah, Chair Jackson, if you look at May, there is Older American Month.
May, where am I looking?
Older Americans. Wow, what a name.
What a polite
Oh.
way to word it.
Okay, Older Americans Month.
Over 21?
Yeah, I
Month
think
of-
these are really great contributions. But one thing I noticed is that we have these months in place, and as the city of Lacey, we claim them as our own, but what do we do? You know what I'm saying? Kind of like, for an example, the school district, they have all of these laws in place, and not necessarily laws, but policies and guidelines and, stuff that they've put out there regarding equity and how much it means to them and all the stuff that they do about it, but does it actually get put in place, right? Like, do we have events and celebrations, and do we advertise the events and celebrations that happen during these months for these specific celebrations, right? I feel like that's, a really important key in this process, is not only claiming the month as existing, but what are we doing during that month to, create some restorative justice?
And I think it looks like a number of them, there are activities associated with them, like Gay Pride Parade and Juneteenth and other things. But there are some others, there's marketing and advertisements, but I don't know that there are activities that they really do in the community. Like Older Americans Month, do we do a parade? What do we do? I don't, probably nothing, but then the Jewish American Heritage Month, there may be some customs that they do that we're not necessarily aware of. Military Appreciation Month. There's a lot of things they do, for the military, various events throughout the country and the community, but I don't think it's like organized, but they do happen. So to your point, many of them do actually do things, but others, I don't think there's an organized effort to do events.
Thank you. And I'm kind of thinking along the same lines of a proclamation is just this piece of paper, and it happens at the city council, and maybe, a certain number of people watch it to present. There's sometimes people present some history back or
Yeah, and I don't know about many of these events, but in the case of like Juneteenth, the city of Lacey is actually involved.
Yeah.
Partnering.
Yeah,
with
that's what
them.
I'm saying. Like we have these, I'm sure Native Americans have celebrations every month for their culture. But as the city of Lacey, as like proclamizing, I don't know if I just made up my own word, but as we proclamize or proclaim, these months as our own and as important to us, it is also our job to advertise and support as we are starting with our Juneteenth celebration. So like the city of Lacey, going out of their way to advertise the Older Americans March in May would be a prime example of, the city of Lacey working together and sponsoring these events to kind of show that we actually are present for these celebrations. And they matter to our community.
A very short march.
Commissioner Blackburn, I really like Proclamize, and I think I'm gonna start using that in the
I think it
future.
sounds fancier than proclaim.
But back to your question of, what does the city do, right? And I think that this is kind of a starting point, for those conversations, again, bringing in outside groups. This could be, and entities to talk about some of the things that they're doing in the community, some of the events that they have, and then building off of that, to Vice Chair Brown's point, last year, we did have, the Juneteenth proclamation, and this year we're now collaborating with the Fred U. Harris Lodge on the Juneteenth event that's going to be at the rack here in June 16th. I think this also provides a really good foundation for additional communication and education and outreach that the city can do on these heritage days and recognition days. Now, the city doesn't necessarily need the proclamations to start doing that, but it's certainly something that could help coincide with those events and kind of push that momentum forward.
Thanks for pointing out older Americans in the month of May
Yeah, let's get out in the streets.
with some turbo wheelchairs, wheelchair.
It sounds like the commission is going to be organizing a march is what I heard.
Yeah,
So I'm going to put that into the work plan for next
One
year.
end of the parking lot to the other. You'll walk past the flags.
But talking about Lacey, it has a sizable senior citizen community. I don't mean just retired invalid, medically fragile, but retired high caliber professionals and always has been. It started with Panorama City, and my goodness, there's, the 55 plus developments in neighborhoods, they really are an anchor to this community, And I'm not advocating city does anything about it, but I'm just saying it cuts across all this other stuff. But you don't hear, I never heard any reference to Older Americans Day, a month or whatever, and they represent a sizable portion of this community.
Or
Just
even
don't
if
put
it's
that
not a
one-
parking lot march, something to honor ancestors, something to honor, the voice of elders and, what they have to say, maybe an opportunity for older Americans in our community to speak out on stuff that's important to them. Because, most oftentimes it's kind of like everybody in the middle that says something about it, and then we have the ageism on the younger side, on the older side, right? So that those could also be some things we can incorporate.
The largest, the highest percentage of voters are with the seniors.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So I just stopped it out. Thank you.
Mhm.
I unfortunately have another meeting at 7. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Good to see you. Always good to have your voice.
So before Commissioner Blackburn leaves, one of the items I actually do have, and if the chair will allow me to jump forward just briefly in tonight's agenda, is that, the Lacey Youth Council has been working very hard this year, and we are coming to the end of the Lacey Youth Council's term. And so I just want to thank our youth council commissioners for being a part of the Commission on Equity. And your voice has been greatly appreciated and a lot of insight and input. So thank you so much for everything you've done for our commission.
Is this your last meeting?
No,
No,
no.
all right.
You can certainly, well, let me just say, you can certainly continue to attend throughout the rest of the summer, but we are ending Lacey Youth Council, so that might not be the case for all of our commissioners, but yes, please, if
You mean
you,
it won't continue into next year?
so it's a one-year term.
Mhm.
So in order, again, to be on the council, we'll have to fill out all of the paperwork and then.
But it's existing next year,
It
right?
exists, yes, it
Okay.
absolutely exists, and
I was gonna say, I just handed out a bunch of applications at the Lacey Fun Fair this weekend.
Commissioner Blackburn, you are more than welcome to continue to join us until, the next year. And if, you're selected again to be on the commission, can continue to be there. But I just want to take this moment to really say that I appreciate the work that the Lacey Youth Council has done, especially being liaisons to our boards and commissions, because we certainly are very interested in having youth voices and youth perspectives, and you have done that.
There's my alarm for my meeting. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank
And
you.
I'll see you in June for Juneteenth.
Okay, and pass that on to the other council
Oh,
members.
definitely will do. Thank you guys again for all the endless opportunities, and I will see you next year speaking manifestingly.
All right.
So just to go back to item number 4, and I believe we're on C here. Does the commission want to continue the conversations about the proclamations and potentially sponsoring these moving forward and working with outside organizations to get representation?
Yeah, I think we should make it clear to those organizations that Lacey is here, we'll provide a proclamation. However, if there are opportunities to partner or support or work with you, whatever, I think they should make the ask and, offer to work with the city of Lacey. Versus just accepting a proclamation and going away.
Right, and again, yeah, Vice Chair, in an ideal world, would be bringing an organization in to accept the proclamation, right? And certainly, I think that community connectivity analysis will be helpful in reaching out to other organizations and entities throughout the community that might be able to accept these proclamations moving forward.
Yeah, because I know in a lot of cities, the mayor walks in the pride parade and things like that, and the proclamation they support it and other things. So, maybe if the pride community make an ask, maybe the mayor will walk in the parade, or city council. That's a partnership. That's a show, a physical show of support versus just giving a proclamation.
Mhm.
But if organizations don't care for that type of relationship, okay, so be it. But I think they should be open to listening to those organizations' requests.
One of the ones I was thinking about what other proclamations could be done is, now we have in the state, May 5th is the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Awareness Day, and that would be great for the city to recognize and to have some of them, some organizations who are working on that issue come.
All these proclamations from 20 to 2022, I'm just curious, were these all requested by organizations, or who requested these?
So not all of them were requested by organizations, but some of them do. And I'll give you a couple of examples that were requested. So Small Business Saturday, that typically comes from the local Chamber of Commerce, recommending that. Overdose Awareness Day comes from a nonprofit group associated with that. Child Abuse and Prevention Month also comes from a nonprofit. But there are others that have, continued through time, and some examples of those ones that the city does annually are like Arbor Day, Earth Month. Let's see here, voter registration. Those are just some examples. Another recent example, North Thurston Public Schools reached out to the city back in March for Military Child Appreciation Month. And so that was something that we were able to incorporate working with their liaison for military children. So I would say it's kind of a 50-50 split where they're coming from individuals or entities in the community and then others that have just, we've done on an annual basis.
I know that over the years, I've requested, Martin Luther King proclamation, Black History Month proclamation of the 3 cities in the county. Whether or not they would have happened without the request, I don't know, but they're just kind of mainstay now that it's just done. And, they look for people to come and accept the proclamation. But originally, they were requested. And so it's here now. It's just kind of a mainstay for a number of years.
So is the direction of the commission then to reach out to groups as the commission to request these? Is that what I heard proposed by Vice Chair Brown?
Yeah, well, I think you mean to request proclamations
Correct.
be
Yeah.
requested?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because it's, at least to me, it seems like if there are groups, for these specific, if there are organized associations that are already working with these groups of people, they should be involved in the process. Like, we shouldn't just proclaim without their, at least them knowing, I don't know.
Well,
I think
we
should
have
reach out to them.
staples. I think any new organization should follow the policy to request it. New organizations.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, like, is there an organization for older Americans
Yeah.
month? You know what I mean? Like, I don't
Right.
know if there are organizations for all of these or not, but
I think maybe to just articulate to the community that the city has a number of proclamations that it makes, ongoing. And it has a process for requests and, make people aware of the process, not so much to go out and solicit proclamations, but make them aware that there is a process for proclamations. And if they're interested, here's where they look, here's where they go, here's what they look like. Otherwise, there won't be enough days in the year.
Yeah.
Well, and that is actually a great point, and thank you, Chair Jackson, for reminding me. We try to have 2 proclamations per regular council meeting, which means 4 proclamations a month. Now, there are and have been occasions where we've done 3, so 5 or 6 potentially, but that is the max extent, just based on kind of timing for council meetings.
and if we reach out to groups about proclamations, are we also letting them know about us and like the partnership that we're doing with Juneteenth now? Because I'm thinking if I was an organization, like, you're offering me a piece of paper, like, cool, like, they want to know what else the city could do to support the work you're doing.
An opportunity to
Yeah.
give a little presentation, little history, where our events are this or something, in the meeting, that happens.
And that is typically what occurs with a proclamation is there is time for whoever is receiving it to provide, some information on maybe the work that the organization is doing. So for example, Arbor Day was one of our annual ones, but there was still a presentation that was associated with it that talked about our tree giveaway and all of the kind of items we were doing that month, that were aligned with, environmentalism, for example. So it would be providing that platform to allow people, and I think, it's starting that conversation to build towards, potentially other events as well, or even ways to communicate, right? So the city has a lot of other communication channels in addition to just coming to a council meeting. It could be something that we focus on our social media or website that month, given that it ties to a proclamation. So Commissioner Stolper, you brought up a really good point here about, hey, you know, like outreaching to the community and this being a good opportunity to say who we are as an organization. So I think, you know, as we continue with that community connection analysis, that might be just a great way to say, hey, we're the Commission on Equity. We want to let you know of a couple of things that are available at the city, you know, should you want to be recognized moving forward.
Yeah, that
It was your
the
idea.
process. Yeah, yeah, that was the process I was talking about, make people aware that there is a process and, you know, access it.
So it sounds like with this one, the group is expressing to be more educational and do some outreach with the community about the existing process rather than
Mhm.
look at the process itself. Great. So the last item connected to that is I also provided a copy of the draft of the 2022 Juneteenth Proclamation. And this has been reviewed by the Fred U. Harris Masonic Lodge, and they provided their inputs into the proclamation. And I just wanted to let you all see it and see if you had any questions or comments about the proclamation. Any additions to maybe to consider. And so that's attachment 2 in the staff report. And you can see the edits that the Fred U. Harris Lodge did. They're highlighted in the yellow. Might be a little hard to see in the document that I just provided, but it is highlighted in there.
So you're saying that the Fred U. Harris group took scratch black and put African American and Native American people?
That is correct, Vice Chair Brown.
When I saw that, looking at the packet for tonight, I just had to go. I mean, Juneteenth is about the abolition of slavery and the Emancipation Proclamation. It has never included Native American people. And for this statement to say Native American people were bought and sold as slaves, you know, I don't know where that came from. I can't imagine Fred U. Harris inserted that language. And, you know, goes on the end of that sentence.
It puts Native Americans in
For
front.
generations
Yeah.
of Native Americans and African Americans. I mean, I know this is a repeat from last year, but I wasn't around last year looking at this, but I looked at that and said, whoa, where did that come from?
And so Chair Jackson, just a quick clarification. The yellow comments are from the Fred U. Harris Lodge this year. So what was previously there was what was read in 2021. Just want to clarify that as well.
Okay, so I should be taking up my concerns with Fred U. Harris Lodge then. I don't know where they got this from. Nowhere in the history of Juneteenth does it talk about Native Americans. You know, Black, African Americans were legally enslaved in this country. I've never seen Native Americans included in the history kind of part of Juneteenth. So the city is just trying to collaborate with Fred U. Harris and add what they're asking you to. So I'll take my concerns elsewhere. But with this being the first national holiday of Juneteenth, where a large portion of it is information and education. This is misinformation, miseducation. Native Americans, and these are my, you know, brothers and sisters I love dearly, and their atrocity can't even be articulated, but it's just not Juneteenth that incorporated the Native American plight in America. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, and I did some additional research, you know, as well in all of my reading, in all of, you know, and it had it blocked off by various decades. It did not anywhere say where Native Americans have embraced Juneteenth, Native Americans celebrate Juneteenth, that they've, you know, taken any ownership of Juneteenth. It's all been African American, African American, African American. So were Native Americans here? Were they a part? Yes. Were the Choctaw Indians that they mentioned a darker skinned race? Absolutely. But their plight was different. And when it came to Emancipation Proclamation, they weren't necessarily included because they were granted their own nations. So us being sovereign became sovereign nations. So I just don't see where they've embraced, anywhere in history, in my reading, the Native Americans embraced Juneteenth.
So I hear both what the chair and the vice chair are saying about this and kind of like the history of the event itself. I do think it is important to recognize that Indigenous tribes and Native persons were also enslaved. And I think that was the intent of, why the Fred U. Harris Lodge made these recommendations. And I certainly think this could provide just an opportunity too for maybe some feedback from the Fred U. Harris Lodge and some education, generally speaking, on kind of, what their perspective was for incorporating that and what the histories were with that as well.
The Fred U. Harris Lodge, they do a Juneteenth event in celebration, but they are not the source of the history of Juneteenth, the African-American community as a whole. So there are other groups in the community, other people in the community that can be conferred, to have input on the history of this document or what it said. Fred U. Harris is not the source for this. They're just one African-American organization in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that, Vice Chair. I was just pointing out that I think that the incorporation was to shine light on the fact that that is a historical reality, that also occurred to Indigenous persons. But I hear what you're saying of, the recommendation I'm hearing is to have it say African-American or Black and African-American.
Period.
African-American people were brought the boot,
Mhm.
just like Native Americans. Black is already stricken. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the status of this is. You're sharing with us the draft. And it looked like this is the draft that's being contemplated for presentation when the proclamation is made. But I just saw that and just said, whoa, that's a whole different side of things.
Well, I do know we do have a commissioner here who has regular meetings with the Fred U. Harris Lodge, and I think that is certainly a conversation that, Vice Chair Brown, you might want to bring
Yes,
just
they like
to
to fight
continue
with
the
me.
dialogue.
They like to fight with me, so yes.
I have never seen them fight, by the way. It's
My
always been
brothers.
good. It's always been good dialogue, but I think that
Yeah.
is an opportunity,
Yep.
to continue that conversation and ask for some perspectives on that.
Yes,
And if I missed something in my understanding of the history of Juneteenth, I stand corrected. So any information you can share back with me after you check with Fred U. Harris, I'd appreciate it because this is a new arena.
Yeah, I'm gonna check some more sources, but the only mention I saw was they mentioned the Choctaw Nation in like 1766 were freed from captivity, from slavery. That's the only mention I saw in history. They talked about the Choctaw Indians in Texas. That's the only thing. But no other reference when it talked about all the events, the activity, the development of the growth of Juneteenth. It didn't talk about a dual celebration, with African American and Native Americans
Not the same date.
either. No, it didn't talk about that.
And I was out of town for about a week or so, and my trip included a visit to the African American National Museum in Washington, D.C. And there was quite an exhibit on Juneteenth, Emancipation Proclamation, and it even included the fact that there were many Native Americans who themselves had Black slaves. And I didn't know that, I know there was a lot of assimilation into the tribes and they helped the runaways find freedom. But part of this exhibit, really explained and showed pictures of just how many Native Americans were slave owners as well. But whatever you can learn, Cliff, please share it with me. But that just kind of jolted me when I saw that. And I consider myself a student of history.
Yeah, I don't support this being finalized at this point.
And we do have another meeting with the lodge coming up here, and I think again, it provides a good opportunity for some dialogue and some history. It sounds like we need to do some research and come back to this group with some more information, and so the starting point would be the next meeting. And although it will occur after the Juneteenth proclamation, I do think again, it's a good conversation and dialogue to have.
Anything else on 4C?
Chair Jackson, I think I am done with all of my items for the time being. I appreciate the conversation that we just had.
Okay, and that takes us right on into the commissioner reports with 5A and the update on Juneteenth planning.
Okay, so as you can see, Juneteenth, marketing and items there, but the planning committee has been meeting, the joint planning committee, with the Fred U. Harris group, and they seems like every meeting they bring in different players. So the last meeting we had, they had the person who's like in charge of preparing the food and those types of things. And then we have others who are in charge of different aspects of it. And they did highlight that they're planning for a larger group than they've ever had before. So they're saying 400 to 600 previously, and they're thinking 750 or so, but they're planning for 1,000. So that is was encouraging to know that they've stepped it up, and which is something that is, I think, admirable and needed. And of course, also in those meetings, Shannon has brought in other members of the city staff who are experts in their particular area, graphic design, and what was the other, marketing or communications?
Community liaison.
Community liaison. And they've worked on the various documents that you see, the various signage, the advertisements and marketing that's going to go into the pamphlet, the brochure that goes into the bill each month, the utility bill. So they brought their expertise in as well. The city would be providing, like Shannon mentioned earlier, other things like the stage and a speaker system and things, sound system. And also you can see the signage that we have here. I think the one on the top is the sign that will be displayed over College Street. Okay, and using those various colors. And then there's an invite. Is that what will be included in the brochure that goes out?
Yes, so this is included in the Lacey Life, which, as Vice Chair Brown just mentioned, goes out to all of our water utility payers.
Yeah, and so the planning is pretty much done. And did you all do some recordings the other day on and how they're going to be used on websites and?
Yep, yeah, so we recorded some members doing some promotional materials, and so we will be putting those out on our social media and website.
Yes, so a lot of work has gone into it, and thanks to Shannon and other members of the city staff, they've really made this thing, beautiful and wonderful. And gosh, everyone in the community has the opportunity to learn about it and know about it and to be present at it. I think Fred U. Harris is, they're nervous because it's really come together well. And I think they're afraid it might be overwhelming, but I think they have a lot of support and it'll be just fine. And this is going to be a growth year for them. So they'll make adjustments moving forward. But I think it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful event. And you talk about partnerships and working with community organizations. I think this is a great example of what could happen with other organizations in the community who are willing to partner with the city. And and it's not like this thing was just 100% smooth. They had some questions, they had some concerns, and we had to address those over and over and over again to to make sure that they understand that it is their event. And we're partnering and supporting them, that we're not trying to make it the Lacey Juneteenth celebration. It is the Fred U. Harris Lodge Juneteenth celebration, giving them all the credit, 41 years. And so we're there, support them. Now, the one other thing that I cover is something that was brought to our attention this week. Chairman Jackson and I had a conversation about it. And then I spoke to Shannon about it, and that is regarding safety and security for the event. That's gonna be a huge gathering, African-American and other, the BIPOC community is gonna be there, as well as softball games and on that type of thing. So there could be a couple thousand people in that park on that particular day. And so with the things that have been occurring in the various communities throughout the country with the shootings and the various racial issues that have cropped up, the white supremacists, those types of things, there's a concern about security, safety and security, and there should be. We should be vigilant. We should be prepared. We should have that in the back of our minds anytime we have a large gathering, especially with the BIPOC community, because people could be targeting those types of activities. So I've asked Shannon if can reach out to the police chief and see if they can develop a security plan for that day, for us. And if they could let us know what it's gonna be, if it's gonna be having officers, there, or having plainclothes people, or China mentioned volunteers, whatever it is. And if the county needs to be involved, the sheriff's department, as well, if they partner with sheriff's department, then that's something I think is important for us to be made aware of. And I think it should be considered by the city.
Yeah, that's interesting. If there's gonna be, I guess how large of a police presence would need to be there would, I don't know, that'd be,
Well, they're,
I don't know, it just feels kind of,
well, I think they're experienced in these type of events where they, are not just hordes of police all around the place,
Yeah.
but they know how to kind of do that, and
Yeah.
having plainclothes people in the crowd and around and about, those types of things happen with,
Yeah, it's an opportunity for the police to interact and, we always need a little more trust in each other and to have their presence there and.
They should have some experts. They should have some experts that are used to doing this.
yeah.
In a supportive way, not
Yeah.
militaristic.
And I think that was what Commissioner
Yeah.
Stolberg was getting at, is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
balance, right, of not being an intimidating factor,
Right,
Yeah.
but being a welcoming factor, but that
Yeah.
also having that security.
Mhm.
And so, we'll certainly, work with our police department and get some more information on that.
And the fire department is right there, do they pull over into the lot and have their emergency vehicle, whatever you call it, there? They're part of the whole safety thing, as well, so, yeah.
It's most unfortunate that we even have to consider this kind of issue in the planning. But, we have to be heads up and cognizant and realistic. The copycat nature of some of this stuff. And we know, we were talking about a little earlier with the flags, we know we have groups in the county that are hardcore racists and what have you. And the trend seems to be trying to identify large numbers of people in a particular area. Because, our security was different in my church Sunday. Just sitting ducks for the wrong kind of mentality, looking for a collection of Black folk in one place. And this is definitely going to be a test for the sheriff department, the police department, because these people are here. We aren't talking about Buffalo and they are here in Thurston County, and they're very visible. They're not invisible anymore. And so I'm appreciative of the fact that this is a part of the planning now. We can't assume. And once an incident happens, it's too late then. So thank you, Cliff, and Shannon and Chief Amata and Sheriff Snazza and whomever. But
Yeah, if they want to talk to me or have a meeting with me, I'm available. I'll, between golf.
scary times.
Yeah, Vice Chair, what I will do is see if we can get them to present for our next Juneteenth meeting on some updates.
That would be great.
Mhm.
That would be great. Thank you, Cliff, for how you represented our commission on that planning effort. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's working with those guys there. They're a fun
Super.
group, yeah. And this is something, boy, they're passionate about it too. I just love that passion they have behind this thing, and it's gonna be a great event.
Chair, it does
So-
look like Commissioner Sauer has a question.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I am supposed to mend booth there that day, and I'm wondering what time should I be there, like 11:30? Do I need to set up booth? What kind of attire should I wear? I mean, things like that. Did you have some information? I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's the one thing I did forget is, yeah, we will have an information booth there on that day. And the event goes from noon to like 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
But of course, we'll need to be there a little earlier. So, by set up, ready to go by 11 a.m. and then, go through. So, and I'll be there all day, but we'll need volunteers. We do 2-hour shifts if you like. And so we'll send out a note and saying, here are the time slots and who wants to sign up, just like we did for the cultural celebration. And then we'll have, people to volunteer for those blocks.
People are out there sooner than noon, milling around. It's just that noon is
When
the
they start.
kickoff, the little formal program and the food service begins, but
Right.
I mean, they're out there.
Smart people are gonna show up early so they get them a spot, so, yeah, but I think if we are ready to go by 11, then we'll be fine. And I'll be there earlier than that, but yeah.
Great.
I'll sign up.
Are there any other director reports?
I have a few director reports, but before we get to the director reports, are there any other commissioner reports?
That's what I meant. Any other commissioner reports? We just have one director. Commissioner reports. Thank you. I'm just not with it today. Thanks, Shannon.
Do you want to talk about?
Either
My
one,
brain is
both.
going too.
Go for it.
It was the Native American Community Cafe. That's the name I was trying to think of. That we went to on Monday
Last week, yeah.
last week. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So that, and the next one is June 2nd at Chinook Middle School, and I think it starts at 5:30. So these are the community cafes that the school district is putting together. So they already had one that I didn't go to, and then this one this past week, and then they have one more. And I think we just kind of wanted to see what they were doing. It's put on by it's put on by their equity. They have like an equity office within the school district. So their equity director was there. And they had a few different tables, and they had these big pieces of paper, and they had certain questions that they were asking about the community members that were there, the students. There were some staff, there were some teachers, about what it meant to feel included in their school, and what it feels like to not be included. So they had all these ideas that they took down.
And then they also had a children's program where they had like the smaller kids go out, and I don't know what all they did with them. They like, I think they read a book to them, and they had some talk about inclusion with the smaller kids too. But what I was taking from that is that the school district is doing these events, and then they plan to kind of gather all this information, all this input that they're getting from the community members, and then send this information back out to, I think, whoever had registered to attend, or I don't know if they're gonna develop a report and put that out, and then look at implementing some of these suggestions that they received at these events about what their students are wanting to see to feel more included. So I know we talked about developing partnerships with focus groups with the schools. I mean, they're already doing a lot. So if we wanted to partner with the schools, I think this would, you know, the staff that was there at that night would be a good starting point. So, yeah.
And the next one that's on the second, it is 5:30, is LGBTQ plus cafe, and the director of diversity inclusion said that they've met with people who were going to attend and staff prior to learn, to get sort of prep people on.
Yes, they were
on
trained. So
people's-
they, yeah, those, they went through some
Identity.
facilitation training.
Yeah, facilitation training. So how to talk about different letters, different identities, what is new, what how people like to be addressed, what are some of the issues, so that they had a little bit more background before they met with the those people who are going to come next week. I plan to go to that. I'm very
Yeah.
interested in that one as well. But really, really good. There was a lot about inclusion, and there was a meal, and there was, you know, it was nice to be together, the Native students and parents to be together. And then, but they did get to the hard part about when have you felt excluded?
Right.
So then there was a lot of strong feelings there, and so they were getting some good feedback. So it wasn't, I was impressed by how it was set up.
Yeah, it's something to consider. When I was thinking back to our youth council, who, when we met with them, you know, they had a lot of concerns. It sounded like with the school district, and it sounded like they didn't feel like they were doing a whole lot of anything. But I think they're starting to, so.
Along those same lines, I know that the students have made up the Black Union in North Thurston School District that kind of kicked this whole thing off with that walkout and their protest and their request of the district. But very little progress has been made between those groups and the administration. You know, they were asking for things like ethnic studies and.
I did look at the website because I was curious about that too. I remember at River Ridge, they were, I think that's where
It started.
it started, yeah. They're working on an equity audit that they're gonna do specifically at River Ridge. And then they're looking at developing what they call restorative justice practices. I don't know what all that entails at River Ridge. And then they are working on designing ethnic study mini lessons that they can give to the teachers. But what it sounded like at this meeting was that it's more optional.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
not from a policy or
Yeah.
district-wide, you're leaving it up to the individual
Yeah.
teachers to exercise their academic freedom, you know, versus here's this diverse school district and students should be learning and reading about more than just European and Western and, you know, And that was the crux of the Black Student Union's demands of the district, you know. We're not included in what we read and what we're taught. And so I thought it was interesting when I saw the 3 community cafes listed
Yeah.
and not an African-American cafe.
Yeah, I don't know how they
Because not
decided.
all Black kids in the district are members of the Black Student Union. So,
Yeah, and it's a chance for parents and
Right,
community
right,
members.
right, but no cafe for the African-American community. I just thought that was interesting, but just talking to students like Elena's and some others, I think there's some conference happening tomorrow called Stay Woke Conference at St. Martin's, where this continuing these same conversations out of frustration. There's nothing happened all those weeks and months, you know, I don't know. So it's really interesting, but being requested to do ethnic studies and all, that goes back many,
Long
many years.
time.
Oh, yeah.
Back,
Mhm.
you know, to the 70s and 80s when I
in
was on the
college,
school
yeah.
board. That is not a new topic. Disproportionality and discipline that needs to restorative justice practices, you know. It just kind of a dog chasing a tail in a circle. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But anyway, I'm glad you guys are attending and listening and can share some things back here. Because when the youth commission met with us, I made the statement, we can't have an equitable community if we don't have equitable schools. And so that's the connection between the city and the community and the school district. So it's interesting to hear from you all's perspective what that community cafe was all about and what they're trying to achieve. But believe you me, those topics are not new. And here we are in 2022. And so let's just hope
Yeah,
that
they talked
maybe.
about, there was one student there who she's a senior this year and she's Native and they have for graduation, you know, usually wear the cap and gown.
Right,
She wanted to wear, I can't remember the name of
The
it.
ribbon.
Yeah,
But
yeah, her whole
a
thing.
cultural garb.
Yeah, and they had told her no, like 3 times that like the teachers said no, the principal said no, the district said no. Come to find out, it's a state law that they have to allow them to wear culture. So like, it was such a fight just to get that. So, and that was just happened, you know, so it's
At the-
interesting, yeah.
at the Squaxin Museum, there are these graduation robes that the community made for, you know,
To honor their
for
graduates.
honor of their graduate, and they wore them, you know, and yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
But you know, for North Thurston to now be a minority school district and to still be having these basic discussions. is
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
Something's wrong. But anyway, thank you for making that connection to us, and I'm glad to know you two are there. Yeah, continue to share with us so we have a sense of the direction they're trying to go.
Yeah.
Any other commissioner report?
On that same token, I was wondering why, or at least the thought occurs to me, why don't we have a relationship with the North Thurston Public Schools equity director or their equivalent as a commission?
Commissioner Hedgewood, it's a great question. And I think Commissioner Stolberg also mentioned that. So something that we are wanting to work on is having a focus group of educators in the community. So talking about North Thurston Public Schools, St. Martin's University, and South Puget Sound Community College, because they all do have, equity representatives or coordinators. And so bringing them in for a future focus group to start building, those relationships and those connections. So it is certainly something that we are looking to do here in the next couple of months.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I apologize then if I repeated the same statement. I guess what I meant was specifically working with them hand in hand in informing ourselves, not necessarily just focus groups, but also in the day-to-day things that we're talking about during our meetings.
Yeah, and so Commissioner Hedgewood, I think focus group, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's basically to start the dialogue. So bringing them in so we can talk about ways that we can continue this conversation, ways that we can collaborate, you know, whether it's, you know, data sharing, for example, or maybe being at events, having, you know, joint conversations in the community. So really, focus group maybe isn't the best word because it's not just a one-way. We're really looking for a two-way dialogue, but the idea being that we would bring them in as kind of that education connection here.
Gotcha. In which case, great idea, Commissioner Silver.
Thank you.
I had one thing and invite you to, there isn't a Pride March this year, which they said because of lack of funds, but there, yeah. But there is a Pride celebration, June 4th. Seems like it used to be the third weekend, but now this time it's June 4th. It's down at the Port Plaza, which ought to be a fun place, 11 to 6:30. All sorts of vendors, entertainment.
Port Plaza, is it?
The Port Plaza down by
Percival Landing, is that
or-
in Olympia?
Just right
Yeah,
outside
Percival.
by
Anthony's
Anthony's
restaurant.
Restaurant.
Okay,
Just,
okay.
There's like a, yeah, stage. And then I just had one quick thing for you, Shannon. I was looking at the new website, city website, and so I found us, the commission in there. But when, you know, I had to sort of drill down a little bit to get to the commission. But when on the front page, when I just put in the search, I put, what did I put in? Oh, the city workforce analysis, like later I saw it in there, but then so I tried to search for it.
Mhm.
It didn't come up. Sort of nothing that I tried on the search bar would come up from the rest of the.
And so Commissioner Clay, if I heard you were searching for the workforce analysis, is that
Yeah,
you were,
yeah.
that was what you were specifically looking
Yeah,
for?
like if I had gone just to the homepage and used the search.
Okay. Well, it's good information to know. We're still building. So part of the website, we launched it we intended to do a couple of phases. So the first phase was to get the website live. Our other page was problematic in a number of ways. So for example, sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not. And it was open, it was an older website, about 12 years old. And so it was open to individuals outside of the organization, sometimes getting into it. So as a matter of, you know, security and operation, we moved to the new website. And that was phase 1. And so now in phase 2, we're really trying to optimize it. And so certainly if there are things that you're like, hey, I'm having a hard time navigating that or finding this information, please feel free to pass it on to me and I'll make sure that Kelly Adams, who's been working on the website, will get that information to take a look into it. I do know the document that you were looking for can be found if you are on the homepage and you go to trending topics. There is a diversity, equity, and inclusion drop-down bar in there, and that's one of the items I believe that is included in there. But your point is well taken, Commissioner Clay, that, you know, we want our documents to be easily accessible. And so if there's something that is not searching correctly or easily, we want to know about it so that we can repair that as we continue to optimize the website. So yeah,
Great.
please feel free to pass on any additional
Fun to
information like
Go
that.
through.
And so if you have not visited the new website yet, I suggest and recommend that you do and provide us with your insight and feedback on what you're seeing, because again, we want to make it the best mechanism to communicating with the community that we can.
Any other commissioners? If not, I think we are ready for the director report. Shannon, I don't see John or Kim.
All right, well, I have a few items, but they're all just going to be very high level, so we're not going to get into too much detail. So hopefully they'll go faster than some of our previous ones. Number one, just wanted to provide an update. I know that we didn't have a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan and community connectivity analysis workshop or work for the last 2 months. And so we will be returning at the June meeting to those. I know that Tevin has been working on some of the materials and we're hoping to come back to this group to continue those conversations. And I just wanted to make sure that that was still in front of the commission and, just to let you all know that we are working on those items. The second thing that's listed is the recognition for the Lacey Youth Council liaisons. And we got to that a little bit earlier, but I do just again want to express my appreciation to our youth council members. And if there are any community members that are youth that are listening to this, that I highly recommend you apply for the Lacey Youth Council and you can become a liaison to our advisory bodies in addition to advising our council just from the Lacey Youth Council's perspective. A few more items. Commissioner Sauer has agreed to be a representative on our community advisory panel for the new police station. And so that is a advisory panel that is going to be meeting about once every 2 months, and just to provide that connection with this group and to give us updates on how and what that conversation is like. And we'll certainly have future presentations by our police and can get updates from that as well, but it'd be good to have a commissioner on there. So thank you, Commissioner Sauer, for agreeing to be the representative. Next item.
Oh, no, nothing, you're welcome. I was gonna say.
Thank you, Commissioner Sauer, appreciate it. Next item is, you'll probably remember at one of our very first meetings, Kelly Adams was here with me, and we haven't seen Kelly Adams since, and that is because she received a promotion, and so she's now the special projects administrator for the city. And I am happy to announce that we have hired a new management analyst, and they will be joining the commission here moving forward as a staff liaison. So I'm going to be looking forward to introducing you to Rafael Fernandez at our next meeting. He will be starting at the city here in the next couple of days, and we'll get up to speed on the Commission on Equity. And I look forward to being able to have him be part of these discussions moving forward. And then my last item is the inspirational item. Are there any volunteers for June's inspirational item? And I see Commissioner Hedgewood. Thank you, Commissioner Hedgewood.
I apologize for being late today. I was supposed to be.
Well, we apologize for not letting you into the meeting, and by we, I mean me. I'm sorry, Commissioner Sauer. Thank you, Commissioner Hedgewood, for pointing that out. And that is the end of my director's report.
And if there's nothing else to come before the commission, the next item on the agenda is to adjourn. Hearing none, seeing none, we're adjourned.
All right.
Good night. Thank you.